an equation, you had to draw a graph, correct? Then I asked you stuff about that equation. The amplitude came from the vertical stretch, right? The period came from the horizontal stretch times the 2 pi or the 360. Then we talked about transformations, and we said horizontal phase shift comes from the C, vertical displacement comes from the D. We also talked about range from an equation. Do you remember how we got the range from an equation? Remember how we got the range from an equation? You did your D value, which is your midline, and you did what to it? Added your amplitude to get to your max. Then you took your D value and you subtracted from it your amplitude to get your min, and then you had your range, right? That was from an equation. From a graph, it's easier. You look at it and you go, the lowest is -1, the highest is 7, boom, done, right? But from an equation, you do D plus amplitude, D minus amplitude. Now, on this test, you would normally have the word problems for trig. I'm not putting that on this test. I'm going to give you the test for 4, 5, and 6 minus the word problems from trig. And we're going to learn the word problems right after the test. Because I need you to learn them well, and if I shove them at the end, you're going to forget this stuff, and you won't learn the word problems well. It's a bad case of badness. So, we're going to go over the word problems after. So there is one more trig lesson that we will go over before the test. Before the end of the year, but not before the test. Okay? But I need you to understand the word problems really well, but I fear if I add it to this, it's just too much. So after this, we just talk a little bit about tan, and then we've learned everything from trig that will be on the test. The test is on Thursday. Okay? Next week, it's on Thursday. On Friday, you're going to learn the trig lesson, the trig word problem lesson, and on Monday, we move on to perms and cons. So like the following Friday, right after the test. Okay, then we're done. 30-1. So 1 unit left. All right. So we've talked about equations giving us a graph. We've talked about equations giving us transformations. We agree? What we have not talked about is graph to equation. How do I get a graph handed to me and you give me an equation of it? Okay? So these are going to be what helps us. These are our little notes that are going to help us at the end, but we're going to use them after. We're going to go through and start doing some discoveries. So I know every equation needs an amplitude, correct? And if I have an amplitude, I have a vertical stretch. We agree? Yes? So how do I find the amplitude from a graph? Do you remember what the amplitude is? Yeah. Yes. So if we want the amplitude off of an equation, the amplitude is vertical stretch. Boom, done. Off of a graph, the amplitude is this formula. Or half the distance from the max to the min. And sorry, I should say half the vertical distance. That's oopsie. Half the vertical distance. So we're going to use the formula each time, but we're also going to just count and see if it works out. The formula is helpful when it gives you like decimal things, right? But, so it's half the vertical distance from the max to the min. So if we go down, we're going to find the amplitude of every single one of these. So make sure you don't write ginormous. You can write like normal sized off to the side. We're going to find the amplitude of all the graphs. We have graph, and then we have another graph, and we have another graph, and we have another. We're going to figure some stuff out. We need the amplitude to get our vertical stretch, correct? To get our A value. So, amplitude formula. I shouldn't write amp, because that's a measurement of music. Amplitude equals the max, absolute value of the max, which is 10, minus the min, which is -10, divided by 2. What's 10 minus 10? 20. What's the absolute value of 20? 20. What's 20 divided by 2? 10. Now let's check and see. Half the vertical distance should be our amplitude. So if I go -10 up to 0 all the way to 10, what is that a vertical distance of? 20. And what's half of that? 10. That's all that formula is doing. That formula is counting. The top part of the formula is counting the vertical distance from the minimum to the maximum. And then the 2 is just dividing it in half. Okay? Done. Flip to the next page. Wow, another graph. Shocking. Let's keep going. Amplitude. I used to teach it all together at once. It just was overwhelming. So now I drill amplitude into your heads, and then we'll drill the B value in. We'll drill the D value in, and then we'll get to the C last. So amplitude is the absolute value of the max, which is 2, minus the min, which is negative 2, divided by 2. Negative 2 minus the minus 2 is 4. Absolute value of 4 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. We could also count it. 2, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. To get me to the top, correct? Divided by 2 is 2. So we can just count the vertical distance and divide it by 2. Boom. Next page. What? Who knew? Who knew another graph was coming after this? All right. You do the amplitude of this one. I hope it's easy. Same as the previous. We can also double check our amplitudes. So some might say it's 1, 2, 3, 4 divided by 2 is 2, which it is. It's 4, distance of 4 divided by 2, which is 2. You can check to see if you're right by doing this. Count down 2. Boom. Count up 2 from the minimum. And they should meet at the same spot, shouldn't they? If it's halfway, you can check your amplitude. Great thing is we're going to draw a line here. Draw a line where they meet. You need to. Every single time, this is what you're going to have to do on it. This is the midline. Midline is on the x-axis. What's the equation of the x-axis? Y equals 0. That will help us in a little bit. Go back to. We're going back to. What is this one? Let's check my amplitude. So my amplitude was 10. So I'm going to count down 10. And I'm going to count up 10. And they meet on the x-axis. Does it always meet on the x-axis? No. If your entire graph is above the x-axis, your midline is going to be above the x-axis, right? Because the midline is the thing that cuts it in half. Then we'll go to the second one. So this one we count down 2, which is the amplitude, count up 2, which is the amplitude, and once again we meet on the x-axis. This only happens when your graph is symmetrical about the x-axis. So this one I have a midline. Of y equals 0. Yeah.
So the only way you can have your amplitude being different instead of like 2 and negative 2, like negative 3 and negative 7, you'd have to have a vertical displacement.
Yes. Absolutely. Because this is your midline, and your midline is your vertical displacement. Your midline is your D value. So if your midline is 0, your D value is 0, which means there's no vertical displacement. You got ahead of the game on this one. So actually just finding the amplitude and drawing it, you have your A and your D value. Done. You have the front and the last, right? Let's go to this one. Oh, wow. This one ain't at 0. Let's see what happens. So our amplitude, I don't know why I didn't just draw here, but I have to draw it. You should be putting amplitude where amplitude is. I just don't have, like, if I'm looking at the graph, I can't literally write there. Okay? So we would have absolute value of max, which is -1, minus min, which is -7, divided by 2, which is actually 6 divided by 2, which is 3. If you don't know, could you not just count? Okay, so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 divided by 2, 3. Right? Then we check it. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Where are they meeting at? Which means D equals 4 because James just like ruined it for me. Fine. Just ruined my excitement. Was building up to that moment and then crushed it. So down here you'd have y equals 4, which means D equals 4. Here's another one. So this one has a distance of 3 to 3, which is 6 divided by 2, which is 3. Then let's check it. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Now there is a formula for midline. It's on your front cover. If you want to use it. The formula for midline is the average between the two. Like if I asked you for an average of 2 scores, you'd add 2 scores divided by 2, right? So the midline is just the average. So in this case, your midline on the formula on the front, just so you can see it if you like formulas, because some people are really big fans. Max plus min divided by 2, no absolute values. Why is there no absolute values on a midline? It can be negative. It can be below. If the whole graph's below, we have a negative midline, which we already experienced once. Okay, so this one would be max, which is 3, plus min, which is negative 3, divided by 2, which is 0 divided by 2, which is 0. So if you didn't draw your amplitude up and amplitude down where your midline met, your formula would give it to you. Okay? But you'd have to memorize it. You do this one. I just want the amplitude and the midline. Yeah. I do what? Oops. Good call. Makes a big difference. You also catch yourself because at the end we're going to graph these, and they should match when you get your equation out. Yeah? Yeah. So you guys are doing this one. Amplitude and midline. So the amplitude is the absolute value of the max, which is 5, minus the min, which is negative 1, divided by 2, which is 3, because it would be 6 divided by 2. Or we can count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 divided by 2 is 3. So I count up 3. 1, 2, 3. I count down 3. 1, 2, 3. And we meet at y equals 2. Now you guys, you have to draw the midline because it's going to be what gets you your C values for science. So if you're someone who hasn't been drawing the midline, you have to draw the midline. So my midline is at y equals 2. I can prove it by doing max, which is 5, plus min, which is negative 1 divided by 2, which is 4 divided by 2, which is 2. So I have my A's and my D's. How the heck do I get my B? The B is easiest to find by actually using that formula I gave you, remember? So let's go to the front page. Well, not the front page, my front page. 25, I believe. This one. So in order to get B, you do 2 pi divided by P, or 360 divided by P. And how do you know which one to use? Look at the x-axis. If the x-axis is in radians, use 2 pi. If the x-axis is in degrees, use 360. Okay? So those you have to memorize. So let's go find them. Go back to this one. So How do we know what is a period? Well, a max to a max is a period. A min to a min is a period. Or past a max, past a min, back to the same height is a period. I always try and start on the y-axis and see if I can figure it out from there. Because the y-axis is the easiest because you go 0 to wherever it repeats itself. Okay? So I'm going to try the y-axis. So, if I start here, I'm on a max. I have to go till I get to another max. Because what's going to happen after this? It repeats itself, doesn't it? It's just going to keep repeating itself. Like here, if you look, it's another repetition of the exact same thing. So the period is how long horizontally it takes to repeat itself. So this is 0 to what? To 4 pi. Do you agree? So we know the period of this graph is 4 pi. Does that go in for B? Period. Go in for B? Is it called the period? No, it's called the period. So does P go in for B? No, it's the period. So this is what P equals. P equals 4 pi. So at the very least, leave it blank before you fill in 4 pi. You look like you look like a dummy when you fill in 4 pi. You look like a kind of dummy when you fill in nothing. I would rather you fill in the right answer, personally. But what I really don't want you doing is putting the period in and feeling like you're right. And you leave so happy after that question, and it's so not right. You picked the common error. It's so sad. So, I can't use P. I need B. So I need to use the formula. The whole x-axis is in radians. So I'm going to go 2 pi divided by P. We agree? I know P, so I can fill that in. B equals 2 pi divided by 4 pi, which is a half. So let's looky here. I have A equals, I don't remember, what was it, 10? Actually, sorry, A is plus or minus 10, because it could be positive or negative, correct? Amplitude can't be, but my A value can be. My midline was at 0, so D equals 0. So now I have the A, I have the B, I have the D. We agree? Okay, let's go find more B's. Okay, let's try and figure out where this one repeats itself. So I'm going to start on the y-axis. I have to go past it. If on the y-axis is not a min or a max, I have to go past a max and a min back to that height before I repeat myself. So I'm going to start at this height. I have to go past a max. Have I repeated myself yet? No, I have to go past a min and then back to that height. So past a max, past a min, back up to that height. So when did it repeat itself? 2 pi. So the period is 2 pi. So P equals 2 pi. B is really easy when P is 2 pi. What is B when P is 2 pi? It's just 1. Now we can prove it by going 2 pi over P is the formula. So it's going to be 2 pi over 2 pi, which is 1. In your dreams, you pray and hope for a 2 pi period. For this one, the amplitude, I believe, was 2. So A is plus or minus 2. And then the midline was 0. So D is 0. Okay. Next one. Start on a y-axis. Ooh, I mean, our y-axis are min or a max. Life is good. When the y-axis is min or a max, because if it's a max, you go to a max. If it's min, you go to the next min, right? So if it's a min, we go to the next min. Ooh, pretend that was on there. So what is it at? Looks like 0.67. So the period equals 0.67. Does that x-axis have a little degree symbol on it anywhere? No. So it's a radian, correct? So we're going to use the formula B equals 2 pi over P. So our B value is going to be 2 pi over 0.67. And that is what you're going to put in for B. You're not going to put in a rounded decimal. You're going to put in 2 pi divided by 0.67. The amplitude for this one equaled 2. So A equals plus or minus 2. And the midline was 0, I believe. So D equals 0. Okay. Example 3. Yeah. No, I usually start on the y-axis because I like trying to find the horizontal distance. And if I go from 0 to something, whatever that something is will always be the distance. If you go from, like, say here to here or something, or like here to here, you'd actually have to calculate the distance between those two points.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is just more work. But there's nothing wrong with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I did the other one, I did it with the maxes, and I got like 0.6.
It's just because they're rounding. Yeah.
So that, would you get that word?
They won't give you a weird number like that one.
Alright.
Okay, so here I'm going to start on the y-axis, which is a maximum. I'm going to go past the minimum, back up to the maximum. And where does that happen at? Ooh, that's even worse. It happens at 4. So the period is 4. Now some people say, I don't know if it's degrees or radians. It's really easy. Is there any degree symbols on that x-axis? No, so then it's radians. All right. So B equals 2 pi over 4. Or 2 pi over P, which is 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2. And A here is plus or minus 3. Okay, next one. So I have to start on neither a max nor a min. You see that? That's neither a max nor a min. So if on the y-axis I start at neither a max nor a min, that means I have to go past a max and min to the same height again. So once you get past a max and a min, you go to the same height. So here I'm going to go, okay, I go past a minimum, back to the same height. Can I stop? No, because I haven't gone past a maximum. Once I've gone past a maximum, then I go to the same height and I stop. So I go past a min, past a max, back to the same height. So when did it repeat itself? At 4. So the period is 4. So B equals 2 pi divided by P, which is 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2. A would be plus or minus 3, and then your D is 0. Okay, next one. Okay, I want you to try and figure out the period of this one, and then B. So here we have our A value, which is plus or minus 3. Here we have our D value, which is 2. And then here we start on our Y, go past the minimum, past the maximum, because we didn't start on the minimum max, go here, which is at pi. So we know the period is pi. So B is 2 pi divided by the period. So it is 2. All right. Can you go to your calculator and type in cos x? Just cos x. Yeah, y equals cos x. Be in degree mode and then press zoom trig. Zoom 7. So make sure you're in degree mode and then zoom trig, zoom 7, and type in cos x. You have it sitting there? Now remember I told you, just leave that sit for a second. Remember I told you way back when we did sine and cos graphs that a sine and a cos graph are just a shift from each other? Right? That's all they are. Sine graph can be represented by a cos graph and a cos graph can be represented by a sine graph. Yes? So this graph can actually be represented by 4 different equations. A positive negative sine equation and a positive negative cos equation. Okay? We're going to go through and do every positive cos equation first. What you need to know though, there's going to be 4 equations. For every single one of these equations, every single one of them, my A, my D, and my B will always be the same. The only difference is we're going to shift it right or left to make it be on top of each other. So let's start writing out the equations first. We're going to do the cosines first. So we're going to go y equals, and we have to start with our a. So we're going to do positive 10. Y equals positive 10 cos, y equals negative 10 cos. Because remember, the amplitude is 10, but my a can be positive or negative, correct? Because it can be reflected. And then I have two other equations. Y equals positive 10 what? Sine. And y equals negative 10 sine. Now, how do you know which one to pick? Well, they'll say, determine this in the form y equals a sine b x minus c plus d, where a is greater than 0. So they'll make you do a sign where a is greater than 0, so a positive sign. Or where a is less than 0, so a negative sign. So they're going to force you to one of the four equations. Right? So does that make sense so far? Positive 10, negative 10, positive 10, it doesn't change. Then next comes my b. What's my b for all of these? We figured it out already. It's a half, right? B equals a half. We figured it out. So we go a half, a half, a half, a half. And then it's going to be x something c. The only thing that's ever going to be different on all of these is the c value, because the c value is a horizontal translation, which moves it onto the other one. And then I need a d at the end, correct? What's my d? For this one, plus 0. So do I have to write plus 0? No, but I will, because I'm proving a point. You see how the a's, the b's, and the d's are not different? So do I have to find them any different way, whether they ask me to ask for a sine or a cos? No. Okay, we're going to go to the next question. We're going to fill in all four equations too. So these equations are going to be y equals, what's my a? Plus or minus 2, correct? So I'm going to go plus 2 cos. Y equals negative 2 cos. Y equals plus 2 sine. Y equals negative 2 sine. Okay. What's the b value for all of these? 1. So 1, x, bracket, bracket. 1, x, bracket, bracket. 1, x, bracket, bracket. 1, x, bracket, bracket. Do I need a 1 there if it's just a 1? No. I could have just left it. And what do I put at the back for the d? Plus 0. Do I have to write plus 0? No, I'm doing it to prove a point. Okay, then we're going to flip over. So this one is going to be y equals plus cos. Plus cos, oh my gosh, plus 2 cos. Y equals negative 2 cos. Y equals positive 2 sine. I don't need the positive in front of it, but I'm proving a point. Y equals a negative 2 sine. What's my b? My b is that ugly thing. So I'm going to go 2 pi divided by 0.67 x. 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 And then my d again is 0. You go do the next 2. So you're working on this one, example 3, example 4. Example 5 you can do, but it kind of sets you up itself. So just do example 3 and 4 for now. When you're done example 3 and 4, go back to example 1, because we're going to talk about positive coses first. Look at your calculators. I have cos x typed in there, right? It said cos x, told you to have it in degree mode, told you to go zoom trig so that it would show up in front of your face. Do you agree? So, look at the positive cos. Look at the y-intercept. What is on the y-intercept? What is on the y-axis? What special part of that graph is on the y-axis? Your max. Your max is on there, correct? Now let's say it's at 0, 1. We agree? It's at 0, 1, yes? The only thing that can move 0, 1 is a horizontal shift. Let me show you. So, don't write this, I'm just proving a point. So 0, 1 is on that maximum, correct? If I vertically stretch it, this won't be 0, 1, it'll be like 0, 4. Does it move it off the y-axis? Does the vertical stretch move it off? No. Does a reflection move it off? If I make this a negative 1, will it move it off? No. If I horizontally stretch by 0, that means I'm taking a number multiplied by 0. It'll still stay 0, correct? Reflection will still stay. The only thing that can move that maximum off is a horizontal phase shift, your C value. So the C value for positive coses are really easy. You'll look to see where the maximum is. If the maximum is on the y-axis, your C value doesn't exist. It's a 0. It hasn't been shifted, correct? Because the only thing that can move that maximum is the C, a shift. If it's off of it, we just say how far off it is, put in our C, and we're done. So let's look at this one. We're only doing positive coses. I know there's 4 equations. I could give a crap about the other 3. I only care about positive cos right now, right? Positive coses have a maximum on the y-axis. If it's not, it's been shifted. Where's the maximum? Yeah, it's on the y-axis, correct? So is there a shift at all? No, the maximum's on the y. Done. That was hard. Could I go x plus 0, x minus 0? Could I do that? Yeah. Would it matter? No. So if your maximum's on, this is how I say it. If they allow me to have a choice, if they give me a choice of whatever equation I want to write, if I see a maximum on the y-axis, I'm like, thank you very much, I'm doing a positive cos, because I don't have to put any C values, right? So if they're giving me options, I'm picking a positive cos. So if they're picking an equation and there's a maximum on the y-axis, they're probably not picking positive cos, because that would be nice. Probably not going to be nice. Now, you also might second guess and be like, well, that's way too nice. That can't be right. That can't be a positive cos on there. And then they give it to you and you're like, it must be harder. It's like, no, it's not. Okay? So positive cos done. Boom. Let's go to the next one. Where is my maximum? Is it on it? Where is it? It's 0.75 pi to the what? Which way did it move? Right. How do I put that in here? Minus 0.75 pi. Done. Pretty easy to make your C value, isn't it? Because I just moved it that much to the right. So, what about this one? There's a maximum here at negative 1.25 pi. Could they actually give you x plus 1.25 pi? It would be the same thing. It would actually work. So they could give either side. They'll often ask for the closest phase shift, and then it would have to be that one, if they want one answer. Okay, we're done the cos. Let's look at this one. I have 2 options. Both my maximums are equally as close. If I pick this 0.33, I would do x what? Plus 0.33. If I pick this one, it's going to be x minus 0.33, right? I'm going to go right. So I'm going to go x minus.
It's the other way.
We said minus
Minus goes right, always. Positive goes left. I don't know. We could replay the video. I'm sure you're right. But I just messed up then. So to the right, it's always negative. To the left, it's always positive. And in this case, you would have lucked out either way, because both of them would work, which would be grand if that was the question, wouldn't it? Okay. Next one. I haven't wrote out the equations yet. So I'm going to go y equals plus 3 cos pi over 2 x minus 1. Okay, so we're going to look at the positive cos one. Where's my maximum? Huh? No. Yes, but no. Where's my maximum? It's on the It's on the y-axis. So do I actually have to do the other ones where I'm moving 4 and 4? No. It's on the y-axis, so where do I need to move it? Nowhere. I'm done it. When there's a maximum on it, you're done. There is no, you're done. There's no C value. You're done. Okay? Next one. Okay, this one. Where's my maximum? What? How are we getting random things? Okay, it's either at the two options that I like, other ones I don't know if they're true, are at -1 and 3. Those are two true statements, correct? If I ask you for the closest one, you would have to say x plus 1, right? If I say make me one, doesn't matter, or they give you one, they could give you x minus 3, right? Both would be correct. I'm always going to pick closest, so I'm going to do x plus 1. Okay? Next one. So I'm going to do the positive cos one, which is this one. So this is how they could force you to pick a positive cos. They say in the form y equals a cos b theta minus c plus d, where a is greater than 0. So they're forcing a to be positive, correct? So that's how they can ask you to say, I want this as a positive cos equation. So it would be y equals, I don't remember what it is, plus 3 cos b is 2. And then I have to use theta. No matter how much you hate theta, I want to put an x. If they have a theta, you put a theta. You can't do what you want. And then d is plus 2. Okay. I'm going to go look for my closest max. Where is it at? This one's always my favorite because people get super stuck. So, how did I tell you can figure out your ticks? How did I tell you how you can figure out what the ticks are worth? Count how many ticks to pi, correct? So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ticks to pi. So this is pi over 6, the first tick, correct? This would be negative pi over 6. Do we agree? The max lands between the two, doesn't it? How can I find out? It is me 5. How can I figure that out? How can I figure out halfway between? Add the 2 up and divide by 2. So I would have to go negative pi over 6 plus negative pi over 3 times by 2. Negative pi over 6 plus negative 2 pi over 6 equals negative 3 pi over 6, which is negative pi over 2. That's me adding them. I still have to do what to it? Divide by 2, because I'm trying to find the average. Average means add 2 up, divide by 2, right? If I asked you the average of 2 test scores, you'd add them up, divide by 2. So if you divide by 2, which is not helpful in this case like this, I have to multiply by half, which is negative pi over 4. You could also use what we call your brain matter, which is way easier if this is in degrees, is it not? So this is negative 30, this is negative 60. What's halfway between negative 30 and negative 60? Negative 45, which is negative pi over 4. I didn't have to do any of that work, right? So we can convert to degrees and make it easier than convert back to radians. So I know it's negative pi over 4 to the left. So I'm actually going to have to do, whoa, I'm kind of aggressive with that. Yeah, plus pi over 4. Okay. What do you suspect is going to happen for negative cos? What's up?
So, like, you know when there's like a numerical response and it says the value A equals C or D?
Yeah.
In that case, it was
C would be negative pi over 4. Because it's theta minus C, right? And this is theta plus pi. How could pi over 4? How could pi over 4 make it so this is a minus? It would have to be minus a minus. So your C would actually be negative pi over 4 with this equation the way it is. What do you think is going to happen with the negative cos? What does a negative do in front? It flips it down, correct? So a maximum is no longer going to be on the y-axis. When it's a negative cos, what's going to be on the y-axis? Minimum. Your graph goes like this to this. So all you're going to do is look for the minimums now. That's it. Positive coses, you look for the maximums. Negative coses, you look for the minimums. Because if you go into your calculator, go to y equals, put in negative cos x, you'll see that the minimum's now on the y-axis. Okay? So let's go through and quickly do those ones. Where's my minimum? 2 pi to the right or 2 pi to the left. In this case, I would lock out again, whichever way I picked, right? So I have to go 2 pi. I'm going to do 2 pi to the right. So I'm going to go x minus 2 pi for the negative cos one, right? Because I look for where the minimum is now. For example, 2, I'm going to look for where my minimum is. Looks like it's at 0.25 pi. So I have to go x plus 0.25 pi. It's on the left. Then I go to the next one. Where's my minimum? On the y. Yay, this one's done. Where's my minimum? Looks like negative 2. So I'm going to go plus 2. Oopsie, needs to write out the equation. And that's how we finish those ones out. I had no intention of doing the sign before you left because you need to get the coast down. So for your homework, it's not going to be a ton, but what I need you to practice is I'm going to give you just coast equations. You still have to get the A the same way, the B the same way, the D the same way. Positive coses, you look for where the max is. Negative coses, you look for where the min is. So, you're going to do page 253, 15 and 16. But listen closely. Number 16, you will find the C values for. Number 15, you'll find A, B, and D. Why do you think that is? Yeah, 15 is sign questions. So don't find the C's yet.
For most